very uncomfortable, because collective rights are absolutely regarded as, certainly for ethno-linguistic groups, as unacceptable by current democratic criteria. But somehow the problem of collective guilt sort of, well, it sort of vanishes somewhere into the mists of history. It's not, I think, currently being taken particularly seriously. Nevertheless, I think the question has to be asked. At what point a particular group that has been subjected, stigmatized as collectively guilty. This is exactly what happened mostly in Slovakia in 1945. If you were Hungarian, then you lost your citizenship. You were eo ipso by fiat declared a non-person, with a few exceptions. And indeed, on that basis, the Czechoslovak state could say out, or some functional equivalent of this word in some other languages. Perhaps you will allow me a little time to tell you a family anecdote. On both sides of my family, I have antecedents in Slovakia, what was in their time called Upper Hungary. And my great-uncle lived in Košice, in Kostra, where he was the history teacher in the Hungarian gymnasium. I think from about 1910 or 1911. Czechoslovak state arrives and he says, I'm Hungarian, I'm under no circumstances going to get Czechoslovak papers, I don't want anything from them. So for 20 years, from 1918 to 1938, he never traveled abroad because he didn't have a passport. 1938, southern Slovakia is reincorporated into Hungary, Košice, of course, as well. He travels to Budapest and they say to him, well, how is it now that you returned to Hungary? And he says, you know, the best thing would have been if the Czechs had gone and nobody else had come in their place. In other words, the socialization that the Hungarian minority had undergone in this interwar period was actually not inconsiderable. I wouldn't say that they'd become totally loyal Czechoslovaks, but certainly they had undergone a different experience from the people who lived in Hungary. I wasn't quite alive then. Not quite old enough for that. Let me go on. So basically what I'm saying is that the Hungarians of Slovakia were subjected to this collective stigmatization and punishment. How does this come about? Well, during the Second World War, and there's a lot of literature on this, the Czechoslovak government in exile, led by Beneš, who was president in exile, formulated a new concept of the Czechoslovak state, which was explicitly ethnic, some would even call it racist, in terms of its citizenship. In other words, if you were a Slav, then you were loyal. If you were non-Slav, then you were by definition collectively disloyal. Now, the really interesting thing here is that the Slovaks were thereby, in a way, whitewashed. There's no way that you could regard the Slovak, the independent Slovak state, which is basically a satellite of Nazi Germany, as loyal to the Czechoslovak state. Nevertheless, that didn't count. But if you were Hungarian and you were loyal to the Hungarian state, that was a different matter. Then you were, as I say, by definition, collectively guilty. If you like, this is the background in which one can make some sense of the 1945-1948 period, during which time the Hungarians and, for that matter, Germans were subjected to severe collective punishment, and not quite 100,000 Hungarians were expelled. We know about 3 million Germans were expelled. The figures are not comparable. The number of Hungarians who remained was at that point somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000. The figure is difficult to establish because all sorts of measures were taken to maintain the fictional figure of Hungarians as low as possible. And it's against this background that inter alia the Czechoslovak state passes legislation which allows for the deportations, the forced labor deportations of ethnic Hungarians, subject to this conference. Finally, one other topic question about this, and everything that I've read about this points in that direction. A group which has undergone an experience of this kind, what kind of loyalty should it have towards the state that subjected it to this collective punishment? The assumption is, oh, well, they can now be perfectly loyal citizens of Czechoslovakia and then Slovakia. Well, I would put a question mark over that. Indeed, I would, if I wanted to be harsh, which sometimes I do, I would put the question, what have the Czechoslovak and Slovak states done to attract the loyalty of their Hungarian minority? I'll leave the question open, but you can construct your own answer to it. And much more practical, if you like, everyday but very real issues. Should this population now expect compensation for what they have undergone? Should the confiscated property, which they had confiscated under the legislation, should that now be returned? The precedents, by the way, are there, because this in effect is what has happened to Holocaust survivors and their descendants. So, I'll wrap it up there. It seems to me that this entire issue raises extremely difficult questions for Czechoslovakia, for the Czechs, for the Slovaks, and actually